This video is part one of a two-part series. We'll analyze Super Bowl score data, and by the end of this video, you will know how to use the if function. In part two, we'll cover Excel's ifs function. But you might be asking, why are we learning two different functions? Which one should we use? Well, it depends. Welcome to Hot Sheets. Don't tell your boss. One of the most common things I do in Excel is to calculate new information. But how I calculate those values depends on whether or not some other value in our data set meets a specific criteria. Maybe I want to write a formula that writes the words exceeds target, but only if my sales number is above my sales target. This got me thinking. You ever notice how often our answers to questions begin with "it depends"? Yeah, sometimes it's a cop-out answer, but really it's fundamental to how we think and make decisions. So much, we practically do in our sleep. Take, for example, your daily battle with your alarm clock. If you're like me, whether we hit snooze or jump out of bed in a hasty panic depends on how many times our alarm has gone off. First or second ring, I'm hitting snooze, baby. Like that alarm never even happened. Third time, and I'm skipping breakfast. After all, sleep is the most important meal of the day. By the fourth time, I've never even heard of breakfast. Socks won't match, and getting out of the door in under 10 minutes is my cardio for the day. Okay, but do you see what's happening here? Whether I hit snooze or panic my way into becoming Usain Bolt depends on if I've heard my alarm more than 3 times. So if it depends is a core part of how we make decisions, shouldn't we expect the same way of thinking to show up in our Excel work? This is precisely where Excel's powerhouse functions if and ifs really shine. Now, to practice in Excel, let's get our hands on interesting data. With the Super Bowl just around the corner, I think it's kind of the perfect time to dive into previous scores. We have 5 columns of data. In the first column, we have year, representing the season for which the Super Bowl was played. Now, there are 2 conferences in the NFL, AFC and NFC. In the second and third column, we have the AFC team and their final score. And in the fourth and fifth column, we have the NFC team and their final score. But beyond the data is a rich history. I mean, how did we get to the Super Bowl, this iconic American institution? It's easy to forget that the NFL was once a startup and at a rough time. In the 1930s, not even a decade into its existence, they had to contend with the Great Depression. Then in the 40s, rosters looked like Swiss cheese with over 600 players having served in World War II. The NFL couldn't catch a break. By 1960, a new threat emerged, the American Football League. These 2 leagues competed in every way. I'm talking all-out bidding wars for star players. American televisions were split, NFL on CBS, AFL on NBC. It got to the point where both leagues were on the verge of financial collapse, but it was then that the NFL announced a merger with the AFL that would save them both. So that same year, the leagues also announced the first head-to-head competition, what we now dub Super Bowl I. And that's the story of the Super Bowl. It's tradition celebrating the challenges overcome and the heated rivalry that almost brought them both down. Now that rivalry, the AFC versus the NFC, is very much alive. And so now I have to know, who's winning? AFC or NFC? Let's look at the data to find out. There have been 57 Super Bowls. So who has more victories, the AFC or the NFC? We'll want to calculate total wins across all 57 games, but let's start with a simpler question. Just one game. Which conference won in 1966 when the AFC's Chiefs took on the NFC's Packers? But first, let's build an if machine. We'll do it together, and in the process, we'll accomplish 2 things. First, we'll ground our intuition by visualizing how the if function really works. And then second, we'll learn how to actually build a formula in Excel. So the if machine is simple. It does 2 things. First, I'm going to give the machine a true-false question. Call it a test. The machine's job is to figure out the answer to that true-false question. Here's a true-false question. AFC score is greater than NFC score. The machine's job is to determine whether the answer to that question is true or false. Second, have the machine write something specific. What I want it to write will depend on the answer in the first part. If true, meaning the AFC had more points than the NFC, then write AFC. If false, meaning AFC did not have a higher score than the NFC, write NFC. And that's it. That's the machine. Have it take the test, and depending on whether the answer is true or false, write AFC or NFC. So let's put our if machine to work. Let's feed it data from Super Bowl I, in which the AFC's Chiefs scored 10 points and the NFC's Packers scored 35 points. Which conference does the machine say won the game? So the test is this. 10 is greater than 35. Is that true or false? 10 is greater than 35 is clearly false. We should expect the machine to write NFC. And yep, that's exactly what our machine writes. How about Super Bowl II? What's the test here? It's 14 is greater than 33. Again, that's false. So the machine writes NFC. Finally, what about Super Bowl III? The test is 16 is greater than 7. This test is true. So the machine writes AFC. Now that we have the hang of our if machine, let's see how we might build one in Excel. The formula is actually pretty simple, especially now that we understand the basics. Remember our machine's logic. If the test is true, write AFC. If the test is false, write NFC. Let's cut out some of those extra words, and we're left with if, test, comma, AFC, comma, NFC. And that's basically how you write an if function in Excel. All right, let's put our idea into practice. Now that we've crafted our formula, it's simply a matter of plugging in the right data. So we'll write equals if, open parentheses. First, we'll plug in the test. That's AFC score is greater than NFC score. Let's find the cell with AFC score. That's D4. Write the greater than symbol. Now the cell with the NFC score, that's F4. And that completes our test. So we'll put a comma and move on to the next part, which is what we want to write if the test is true. So if true, write AFC. Since AFC is text and we're writing it inside of a formula, we have to put AFC inside of quotation marks. It's the only way Excel knows that what you're trying to write is text. If you forget, the formula won't work. Okay, so comma, and the last thing that we need to plug in is what to write if the test is false, which is NFC, again inside quotations. Let's close our parentheses, hit enter, and it works. So let's apply this formula all the way down our data set. Okay, looks like the formula works all the way down. So from existing information, we now have the conference winner for every Super Bowl. Now we can just count how many games each conference won to answer our question. I won't walk through this count ifs formula, but I do want you to see how simple it is now that we have this new winner column that we just created. So to the results, drum roll. So the NFC has won 29 championships and the AFC has won 28 championships. Not sure what I was expecting, but for some reason I wasn't expecting a practical tie. That puts some serious weight on Super Bowl 2023. Let's see if the AFC can tie it up. So for now, I'm going to call this a draw, but I'll show you something interesting. Let me first add a little color to our winner column, and let's go down to the data set again. Check this out. The AFC and the NFC have been trading off decades of dominance. The AFC ruled the 70s. Then the NFC assumed the throne from the mid 80s to the mid 90s. They had some seriously big wins. Look at the 85 Bears just steamrolling the Patriots 46-10. In fact, most of these NFC scores are pretty high. Actually, maybe that's how we break the tie. How much is each conference winning these games by? What's their average margin of victory? And we see some fascinating results. On average, the NFC wins Super Bowls by 17 points, a full touchdown more than the AFC. I think that's mostly due to that decade of NFC dominance that started in the mid 80s. Actually, let's add some color again, but this time to the margin column. How about the bigger the win, the darker green a cell turns? Yeah, there you go. The NFC absolutely crushed. I mean, some of these games are total blowouts. Now though, I'm kind of wondering, exactly how many blowout wins has the NFC had? And how about we define a blowout win as winning by more than, say, 21 points? That's what we want to find out next. So first, what do we want to write? In this case, we want to write the words NFC blowout. Now, whether we have an NFC blowout depends on two things. First, that the NFC actually won the game. And second, that they won by more than 21 points. Those two things will be the basis of our test. So let's populate the if machine. We know that we want to write NFC blowout, so let's set that as the thing the machine writes when the test is true. We'll come back on what to write when the test is false, but for now, let's turn to the test. Remember, our test needs two parts. Winner is NFC, and they won by at least 21 points. Both things have to be true for the machine to write NFC blowout. So let's craft a general Excel formula. If winner is NFC and they won by at least 21 points is true, write NFC blowout. If false, write something else. Take away the extra words, and we're closer to our Excel formula. This should look familiar, but the difference you've probably noticed here is that and. How do we write and in Excel? Well, there's an and function, and it's really simple. All we have to do is move that and to the front. Write parentheses, then inside those parentheses, write all the conditions that have to be true for the whole test to be true. We have just two conditions. So I like to give things names, and I call the and formula an and box, because all you have to do is fill up the box with whatever conditions make up your test. I know it's silly, but that kind of stuff can really help you remember. So with that, the updated formula structure now looks like this. There's now an and box sitting in the test section of the machine. All right, back to Excel. So for Super Bowl 1, we'll write equals if, open parentheses. Let's build out our and box. So and, open and close parentheses. Winner is NFC, so G4 equals NFC, don't forget the quotations, comma. Margin, which is H4, is greater than 21. Make sure to close the and box with the parentheses, then comma. And what we want to write if the test is true, NFC blowout. Close parentheses, hit enter, and it worked. Turns out Super Bowl I was actually an NFC blowout. Now let's paste this down a few rows to check that everything is working. And well, it's working kind of. Notice we never told the formula what to write if the test is false. So let's go back to our first formula and fix that. Let's add one more comma, and we're gonna have the formula write a dash when the game wasn't an NFC blowout. Let's copy that down. Now back to our main question. How many games were NFC blowout? So out of 29 NFC wins, 10 have been blowout victories. Now, from a fan perspective, blowout wins are usually pretty boring. I like exciting games, like in 2022, when the Chiefs mounted a fourth quarter comeback to win by 3 points. Or in 2017, when the Patriots and the Eagles got into an offensive duel and combined to score 74 points. That's what makes a game a thrill to watch. And that brings us to our last question. Let's find out how many Super Bowl games have been a thrill to watch. Let's go back to the if machine that we just built with the AND box, and let's update it with our new scenario. So instead of writing NFC blowout, we'll write thrill. And this time, our test is margin is less than or equal to 3, or total points is greater than or equal to 70. The key difference here is the switch from and to or. Rather than both conditions having to be true, we only need one condition to be true for the machine to write thrill. So rather than an AND box as the test, we'll set up that's right, an OR box. That way, if the game is close, or if it's a high-scoring affair, either one, the machine writes thrill. And we're left with our general formula. So we'll write equals if, we'll build our OR box, let's fill it with our two conditions. Margin, which is H4, is less than or equal to 3, comma. To get total points, we'll simply add together AFC score and NFC score. That completes our test. Now, if the test is true, we'll write thrill, and if false, we'll write a dash again. Great, we'll copy that formula all the way down, and then back to our main question. How many games have been thrills to watch? So we'll check our calculation table. Boom, there have been 11 games. We can only hope the same for Super Bowl 2023. Hey, I hope you had fun, but more importantly, I hope you take these skills into your professional life. Remember that data is information, and the better you are at working with data, the better you are at making and influencing decisions, and the more likely you are to be recognized, and that always feels good. So if that's what you aspire to be, subscribe to my channel and be sure to click that notification button so that you don't miss part 2, where we'll master Excel's modern version of if, the ifs function. I'm Mario Estrada, this is Hot Sheets, and we'll see you next time.